Rich people don't care about poor people. Rich people, you know why they're so driven by money? Because it's freedom. That's why that's why they only that's why they only talk to people in their own class.
Hey everyone, welcome to our latest Trade to Black podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. Today we're talking future. Some crazy stuff happening this week, including some successful businesses raising a lot of money. So let's get right to it. Let's bring in millennial entrepreneur Anthony Verrill. Good to see you, sir. How are things?
How's it going? It's good. Everything's going up right now. It's been a
we had that
great
announced.
mood. People think your horoscope. Yeah, go ahead.
We were talking about that last week as well, so it continues.
Yeah. It's good. Momentum's good.
Ben, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, the market's going up on a few sectors. So very interesting times at the moment.
Why do you think that is, guys? I know I asked that last week, but are you still surprised to see this trend a week later? Like, how much longer can we see this sort of trend, this ride continue, Anthony?
I'm still, like I've said the entire time. I mean, I'm cautious. I'm trading a couple of NFTs right now. I'm up like 10x on. I mean, Ethereum's moving. Tech stocks are starting to move. Meta just announced that buyback, which I bought a whack of Meta at like 96. That's been a decent trade so far. I mean, there's pockets of opportunity. That being said, I still don't trust the macro. Powell came out and did the same song and dance as he normally does yesterday at the FOMC meeting. I think until we hear the word taper, which I don't think is going to be for a while, the market's going to kind of you'll see booms and busts, and it'll just chop pretty much sideways until then.
Yeah. Taper. What do you think of that word, Ben?
Yeah, I'm with Anthony. I don't know how. I think tapering won't happen for a while. I think they feel they're pretty explicit in the language that they don't have inflation under control yet, in their opinion. And until that happens, I don't see a big breakup in the market. I don't see the conditions for where you can just buy anything and all ships are rising together. I think you got to be selective, and we mentioned that a couple weeks ago. That I'm cautious on this market, but it also wouldn't surprise me to see it melt up a little bit to maybe the 4,300 level on S&P, mainly because that the sentiment is so bad right now, and very rarely do you get, unless you're right in the middle of it. The start of declines rarely happen when sentiment is so poor, mainly because a lot of people have already sold. And you don't have as much downside pressure. And that's the old proverbial wall of worry that the market tends to climb when people are very pessimistic. And if you look at the sentiment indicators out there, people are pretty pessimistic at the moment.
Yeah. You agree with that analogy, Anthony? I assume you do.
Yeah, completely. I completely mimic Ben's sentiment 100%.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys saw this week. Are you guys familiar with this company called Colossal Biosciences? Wild news this week. It's the world's first de-extinction company. They announced earlier this week an oversubscribed $150 million Series B financing led by U.S. Innovative Technology Fund, USIT, with participation from Briar Capital, West River Group, Bob Nelson, Animal Capital, among many more. So I guess we'll start with you, Anthony. This company's primary purpose will be reviving extinct species such as the dodo bird. This is wild. Like, how exactly will this work? Like, this is wild.
I think it's awesome. My first thought when I heard the announcement, I think it was like 2 or 3 days ago, was I wish I could have wrote a check into that Series B financing. That AI, these are going to be like huge macro themes moving forward. And while I think everyone's first inclination is holy shit, like they're going to try to create Jurassic Park. That would be cool long term. But I think starting with something like the dodo bird, going into like the woolly mammoth, and then using it to bring back species that have gone extinct in the last 100 years due to us imposing our will on the land, such as like the rhino, the elephant, big cats, being able to bring these species back. Granted, we still don't know the ramifications that will have on the environment. And while I do think that this is a very net positive, technology that's being explored for mankind and for the earth, one thing's not going to change, and that's going to be our impact on these environments that have caused these extinctions. So we can bring back these species I'm really hoping it's not for novelty. I'm hoping that it's to further technologies in genetic sequencing and in cloning and in doing things that we can actually apply to technology that will be a net benefit for humans. But bringing back the dodo bird, bringing back the rhino, these are all noble causes. But if we're not going to lessen our impact on the environment, it's kind of being done in vain. Nonetheless, I would have loved to invest in the company and in that technology.
Ben, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm sort of torn about this whole thing. Obviously, we all watched Jurassic Park, 20 years or 25 years ago when it came out, and a lot of this stuff would be cool to recreate the T-Rex or whatever, woolly mammoth or so forth. But I'm concerned about some of the ethical questions here. I mean, we're basically essentially playing the creator and bringing back species that were extinct for a reason, and we don't know some of the dynamics and variables that are going to turn out when you start recreating and genetic sequencing these prehistoric creatures. So I don't know. I would like to see a little bit more ethical studies around it, and the impacts that it could have. But but that being said, obviously I'd love to see some of these recreations. I think it's very cool the way technology is going, and I'd probably write a check too if I could in this company.
Well, it's definitely caught the interest. Like when I look at their Series A, $15 million round, some notable names include Thomas Tull, Tim Draper, even Tony Robbins. Where do you see, I guess, like what's the end result in this? Do these prehistoric, extinct animals come back and
It's not about the animals.
What is it then?
I firmly believe it's everything that we do from a technological standpoint, you can take and pivot and retrofit it into furthering technology for humans. I don't know enough about genomics to have an educated conversation about it, but I would be willing to bet that being able to genetically sequence these animals and being able to actually bring them back to life will have some sort of impact on technology that's going to further us, whether it's de-aging, whether it is understanding genes, whether it's hacking the human body finally. I think it will further different disciplines that we apply to humans 10 different ways. So, that's where I think the real big picture idea is. I don't think it's the big picture idea is bringing back the dodo bird or bringing back the woolly mammoth,
right,
but being able to fine tune those technologies to do it. I think it further things in other arenas. Now, I usually
so this pertains.
Don't
you think
really
a lot
consider
to
ethics.
You think this pertains a lot to the longevity industry? Then this is where we're going.
It could, yeah. It could. For us to bring back a species that's extinct is a pretty big thing. Not to get cliche, but we're basically playing God in that.
Yeah.
In retrospect, but with the exception of the woolly mammoth, the dodo bird was actually extinct, I think, because of human impact on their environments and overhunting. So, if we're bringing that back, that was done because of us. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think trying to play God and bring back dinosaurs, you could get into an ethical conversation. Where I'm hoping this doesn't go is if they try to bring back like prehistoric man and understand how we could have potentially evolved from Neanderthals. That kind of is where the ethics, I think, come into play, which that would be pretty interesting.
Or something like, or maybe somebody like Cleopatra or Genghis Khan, some terrible people out there, some good people out there. I hope you're right that they don't, eventually
but the thing is,
put this into human technology, bringing them back.
Yeah, but the thing is, the thing is they can't bring back actually, maybe they can with mummies, because the way they're doing it with the dodo birds and the woolly mammoths, from my understanding, is they found genetic material and DNA that's been preserved and frozen in ice that they can then bring into a lab and sequence and replicate it. I'd be curious to see what would happen if you did it to like mummified remains or something like that. But yeah, bringing back like historical figures throughout time, no, I don't think that should ever. It's
probably
done.
Not a good idea. I'm curious about, and I echo everything you said, but I'm curious about the commercial potential of all this and what are the real motives behind it, because just to picture the sort of commercial applications you could have. Picture like a zoo that has like the woolly mammoth and all that on a large scale. These national parks and how that could be monetized. So I haven't got enough in the weeds to understand the true motivations, and I'm sure there's several of them that branch off into different areas. But is this primarily being done for a commercial purpose to bring back some of these species and to create, theme parks and to create, events that attract and to monetize it?
You know where I honestly think the big picture is being able to clone and being able to mass produce animals, cows, chickens, turkeys, animals that we consume. That's probably the big picture here. Something that they're doing with sequencing the genome and then cloning the animals has something to do that will further being able to clone animals in general. And I mean, if we can solve that equation, sure, people are going to yell and scream and it's unethical and whatever. But if we could grow our food versus having to nurture, farm, slaughter, etc., it'd be a much easier process. I mean, contract farming is one of the largest stressors on the environment, and it's simply just a function of consumption on our end.
Plus,
so if you can clone a woolly mammoth, you sure as hell could probably clone a cow.
Yeah, and tackles the food crisis as well, and that's a major concern, right?
Yeah, well, we've already cloned, this is like, I look at this as the next generation. We cloned Dolly the sheep, remember, like 20 years ago, whatever. And that was first generation. Yeah. The clones had a ton of problems with it. They had abnormalities. They died early and things like that. So this technology, it's important to realize that this technology is not particularly new, like in terms of cloning species. That's been going on for 20, 25 years. But I guess this would be a step up in what they're doing to actually bring back prehistoric creatures and not necessarily cloning animals that are alive today. That's the big difference, right?
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. The selfish part of me really would like to see like a T-Rex or a raptor or like dinosaurs actually in real life. I mean, there's Jurassic Park's one of my favorite movies. I wouldn't mind seeing that come to life, but at the same time, I mean, I think that's a very slippery slope.
Well, that's the ethical considerations that I was talking about earlier, right? If you're going to clone the dodo bird and the woolly mammoth, which is 70,000 years old or whatnot, then obviously the way people are, they're going to take it to the next level, and then the T-Rex is eventually going to come if they can, if the DNA is not too old or whatever. If they can do it, these other animals are dinosaurs are someone's going to try to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a meme the other day that actually, it doesn't really apply to this, but the theory really applies to this. And it's like, we hacked the algorithm in creating nuclear fusion in a reactor and solved that energy equation. And the only application that we made outside of power plants was a fucking nuclear submarine, which was basically a portable military base that can go wipe out any country at will. If we can put a nuclear reactor in a sub and have it run clean energy for 30 years, that couldn't be applied anywhere else, like cruise ships, shipping vessels. To me, that just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. The one application is just a mass killing machine. I think we do the same thing with this stuff.
So, like, we like to tackle a lot of like emerging industries, crypto, cannabis, psychedelics. When we look at this whole longevity industry, we've had some conversations in the past too, even with Christian Egermeyer, who's deep into this too, Ben. But top line, I guess, question: where do you see this industry, developing? How fast within the next 5 years?
It's developing very, very quickly. Very quickly. There was a study, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, that they did some genetic sequencing on a mouse, and in the lab, and that mouse lived longer than it would have outside of that. And so they create some sort of hacking technique there to allow that to happen. That could have applications for humans. There's a story actually this week about a billionaire tech person who who tried to recreate being younger, and apparently he succeeded. And he has a 37-year-old heart, they determine, when he's 45, and things like that. So we're getting closer. Technology is getting closer to being allowing that. Previous to this, it was just like, take your antioxidants, take like resveratrol and things like that to try to slow down the aging process, maybe increase the length of your telomeres, and it has limited success. Now we're getting to the stage where big time research is coming, and I think it's going to have an effect. I have no doubt that within, say, 15, 20 years, humans will be living like 120, 130 years old, will be fairly common.
Wow, you think?
I think so. I think technology, I mean, look what we're talking about now. I mean, they're recreating the woolly mammoth and potentially dinosaurs within 5-10 years.
I think it happens. I think it happens a little bit differently. I don't think it happens through these. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want to die. I'd like to live 200 years. But I think it becomes a function of, we create the technology where people can actually buy an extra heart. You can buy extra lungs. You can buy extra kidneys, and then just swap them out when you're 50, when you're 60, when you're 70. I mean, if I could get in line right now and you told me you pay me X today, and when you're 50, there's going to be a brand new heart that's basically at day zero that we can just pop into you. Kidneys as well, liver. I mean, you can transplant all of these organs. If you think we can clone full animals, you sure as hell can clone an organ per se. And I mean, that gets a slippery slope too, because then we're talking about, okay, so rich people get to live forever, but poor people are fucked. Especially ones that need them for health reasons, versus just the sheer wanting to live forever.
A couple weeks ago, actually, a couple weeks ago, the first ear was a 3D printed ear was actually added to a person. So, I mean, we're having 3D printed organs, or I guess it's not an organ per se, but an ear added to individuals. It's actually happening right now. We've already had the 3D printed heart. I don't know if that's actually gone into somebody, but we have like a beating 3D printed heart in a lab. So no doubt, who knows, within a year or 2-3 years, this may go into a person.
This is like a real.
I mean, there's guys that. 100%. I mean, there's people in Asia and around the world that, like, they find organs from people to basically.
Huge black market.
There's also people that have reported. It's huge. There's also people that have like self-elected like blood transfusions just to be cleaning out what's in their system on a weekly, monthly basis. I mean, it gets pretty gory, and it gets pretty, on the borderline of like ethics. But I mean, it makes sense if you have the resources and you want to stay healthy. There ain't nothing better than giving your body a tune-up, and the ways to give it a tune-up, unfortunately, aren't glamorous right now. They're pretty barbaric.
So you think this is where we're going? That we're going to be cloning people into the future, where you can get like a transplant of some sort, heart, lungs, liver, that sort of thing. You think that's where we're headed? Not
cloning people, but coming up with organic and artificial organs that you can actually just buy, shelf, and if there's ever a need for it, boom.
Wow.
I mean, I'd pay good money for the ability to have that right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would. Would they broadcast it? Probably not. The ethical thing, obviously, would probably be, I think, kind of a skeptical thing at first. But once somebody does it and they see the
ethical, well, I mean, the problem is the ethics. I mean, you're going to get people that probably riot, and like it would, like the wealth gap. The wealth gap is exacerbated to such a point that, like, the wealthy right now, like they can consume more. They can experience different things as like an elevated lifestyle. They can't play God yet.
Yeah.
If that does happen, then there's a very ethical question there, because just because I can afford it doesn't mean that I should be entitled to a heart replacement when somebody else's heart is actually failing. Meanwhile, they just don't have the resources.
Yeah, that's a good point. Crazy
Yeah.
story.
You're literally playing God at that point.
Crazy story, to say the least. Okay, let's switch to interesting news this week out of Canada. I want to switch to psychedelics. Reported by Global News, where the Justin Trudeau government has tabled a bill that will actually delay by a year an expansion of medically assisted dying to people with mental disorders. Was basically their only underlying condition. So the bill seeks to delay the expansion until March 17th, 2024. And the main reason it was delayed was because Justice Minister David Lametti, who tabled the bill earlier this week, announced back in December of 2022 that the nation's capital of Canada, Ottawa, intended to seek the delay after hearing concerns the healthcare system might not be prepared for an expanded regime. If you looked and read between the lines, Ben, what does that mean?
Well, I take that to mean that primarily that they don't have enough assisted therapy counselors and physicians. We talked to CEOs in the industry like Peyton Nyquist, who have said that there's going to be a huge deficit, and that's actually the biggest challenge that they face as a for-profit business, is getting enough therapists who know how to administer assisted therapy. So this is, having the right training to administer the right amount of drugs, and perhaps there's some facilities into there too, and resources with some medical personnel. Some groups or some fields having trouble getting the right medical personnel. So I think it has something more to do with that, and hopefully that's just going to be a function of time to try to get more trained administrators in there to allow this to happen. So I think they're just putting the delay on it, and I would assume that it has something to do with that.
Well, last week we saw Rick Doblin on Fox Business News talk about how MDMA most likely will be legalized Q2 2024. We had a later interview with Dr. Ben Sessa, co-founder of Awaken Life Sciences, saying that we're going to need as many as 60,000 therapists within the next 12 months once this goes live. Like, Anthony, where do you find 60,000?
Hold on. Once what goes live?
Let's say MDMA becomes legalized, we're going to need the proper training and therapists globally to basically assist people with the proper procedures when it comes to these medical conditions and therapy that they're going to be being treated for. So this is the numbers that are being floated as to how many trained therapists that are going to be needed. So the question was asked, where do you come up with that? So you get an understanding, to Ben's point now, as to why the proper training, like we've heard a lot of people like Peyton talk about this from Numinous a couple years ago about the importance of it all. But now that we're starting to see this all come to fruition and understand where the industry's going, like 100%, like we have got to have the proper education and training that's involved. And there's a lot that obviously needs to be trained.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but ChatGPT could probably be a pretty good therapist at scale. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't trust an AI platform and an algorithm to prescribe.
I don't
think
a lot of people too with mental health.
Or to assist you. I mean, I guess you still need the subjective nature of a human being to diagnose somebody for mental issues. But I mean, when we're talking about MDMA assisted therapy, we're talking about serious mental issues. I mean, for people on like a day-to-day basis, like that have anxiety, that have depression, I mean, a lot of the times those people just want someone to talk to and to vent to. And I mean, if you're able to spin up an AI avatar, and you're able to spin up via AI a persona that can actually sit there and have a conversation with someone and rationalize with someone and give a human element to it, I think you could eat into those numbers significantly. Granted, you're going to have a huge disparity once you start talking about serious mental illness, etc. But I mean, I think you'll be able to find the ways to I guess administer this kind of therapy moving forward.
I think it's important to note that end of life dying, the way I understand it, it's not like you're going into the dying in a prison, right? On death row. Like, there's a lot of counseling that gets involved here. It's not just the administration of drugs in a very sterile way, and then you're done. So I think the training aspect is something that definitely is lacking in the industry right now, and I'm pretty confident that that's what the government's talking about, even though it wasn't explicitly stated in the news article that came out today from Global.
Yes, yeah, but I think the end of life dying stuff, like that could be administered in a hospital Like, I think there's certain use cases there that you don't need to go under a medical eval for. Like, my mom has been very blunt. She's like, if I ever have Alzheimer's, ALS, terminal cancer, she's like, you have to promise me that before I become a vegetable and that I'm sitting there and just completely gone, that you'll do something and just alleviate whatever's going on. And I mean, that I think someone should be able to make the decision on. If I ever have Alzheimer's, or if I ever have ALS or Parkinson's or something that is uncurable, at some point where your cognition starts to slip away and you lose control of your body, take me out. I'll be able to make that decision and say, look, I've had a good life. It's been a good run. If I think at this point in time, like, my quality of life is deteriorated to the point that it's justified, I should be able to make that decision for myself, and someone else shouldn't be able to. Someone else shouldn't have to psychologically evaluate me. The medical thesis and justification is there. I'm not coming back. The only reason why you would want to prolong my life is to keep the register running for medical care and for everything, et cetera. At that point, I'm just a profit extraction for big pharma and for the health industry. In those cases, I don't think someone walking on the street right now should be able to walk into a clinic and say, hey, I want to end my life. Like, that's just enabling suicide. But if I'm gone, or if my body is going to never come back, I think you should be able to make that decision as a human being.
There was some wild stuff, actually, in one of the chapters, or episodes, I should say, in the How to Change Your Mind. I forget I think it was Switzerland, but it was like assisted suicide hospital that actually took place. And there's people that actually suffered from, like, major depression, but something that's been going on for quite some time in some of these countries actually surprised me somewhat. But the way they presented it was an eye-opener for sure, because it almost like was accepted in society. But, to your point, Anthony, like, there is lots of people I've spoken to where, I know somebody very close that was all there. They have now dementia, and I see the decline of where they are today, when 3-4 years ago they were saying, if I ever get to this point, like, end me. Like, I don't want to live like this. And, we might have a lot of people on here that may disagree with what we're saying here, but it's not about whether we think it's right or wrong. It's just conversations that we've had with people before, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that, where somebody's actually shared that kind of information, and when they get into that state.
But see, I don't agree that you should be able to end. I don't agree that you should be able to end your life because of depression, or because of anxiety, or because of schizophrenia. I've had to deal and watch very closely with someone that's dealt with bipolar, like crippling bipolar depression. Yeah. Like, the frame of mind that they were in when that was the worst, they probably would have elected to take their life at that point in time. Yeah. They're completely fine right now.
That's great.
And living a normal life. I mean, granted, like, it took its toll, but if that person would have understood what happened on the other side of the equation, they would have never got a second chance at being around or being whatever. Because, I mean, let's be real. Like, in the middle of, like, a depressive episode, like, someone could easily want to take their life. Yeah. Are they willing to move to put whatever needs to happen and move forward and come out of that? Yeah. And that does happen. So, I mean, I'm not for it for mental illness, even serious mental illness.
Man, the stories that we
in
hear,
that regard, like, you shouldn't be able to just walk in somewhere.
The stories that we hear, even the gentleman we spoke to yesterday, Ben, talking about his son and the stuff that he had to deal with, major depressive disorder, and the doctors that they saw, and how ketamine actually was a big contributor to his health and support. But interesting times, to say the least. It was a heck of a story. But one of the things I wanted to bring up too was that as we talk about the development and, like, the training that's going to be needed, and potential MDMA being legalized come Q2 2024. Real quick, Ben, what are some notable phase 3 trials that are going on right now with specific companies and their timelines? Because we've talked about Awaken in the interview last week. We have news coming out with Compass, potentially Q3, Q4 of this year. If we add all these things up and have positive data, I can't help but feel this industry is going to explode a year from now. Don't you?
I would say yes. I think so, and I think you're seeing some of the birth pangs of increased sentiment happen right now because of the MAPS 2 studies, which is kind of surprising that a non-for-profit was actually gone through the phase 3 and had 2 successful phase 3s. Usually it's the for-profit that are there first, but yeah. So we've seen the MAPS 1, MAPS 2 data, confirmatory results show that MDMA assisted therapy is working, and so that's going to go through the FDA funnel, and that's probably going to get approved. Compass is going into phase 3 as well, and the phase 2Bs looked really good on that. Now they're going to have a lot more participants, and they're going to they're going to expand that. That's looking good. And then you have Awaken Life Sciences. They came out and they're doing their testing in the NHS health system in Britain, and they're in a phase 3 as well. So you have 2 for-profits in phase 3. You have 2 studies in phase 3 for nonprofits that are going to the FDA right now. So that's 4 studies. And now we're getting to a point where it's not conceptual anymore. We're getting to a point where it's like it's very real. The science is very real. It's in late clinical phase studies right now, and it's looking good. So I think people are getting excited. It's still going to be a while before they're actually approved outside of the MAPS, probably 3 years for Compass or so forth. But it's getting to the point where, the science is looking good, and it's very investable.
Anthony, there's been people we've spoken to that believe the psychedelic industry is $1 trillion industry. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it works. I mean, MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin, LSD, I mean, they work. The problem is can they be patented? Can there be a moat built around them? And can they be commercialized? Because as far as what I've seen to date, the therapies that are working are basically the drug in its street form. So, I mean, is the drug the linchpin to profitability, or is the therapeutic aspect and the assistance in administering it the linchpin to profitability? I mean, I'm a huge believer in psychedelics. I think they work. I mean, I think they unlock certain things in your mind. I think they give you certain mental clarity and increase the mental acuity that you have. I just don't know right now where to invest that's going to create profits in the future. I just think there's too much opacity as to where the actual sector can go. That's why, I mean, one of my only investments that I've written personally to this day is in Revitalist. And Revitalist is a play on care. They're a clinic chain in the United States. They have a ton of patients. They have a ton of great stories, but they're not drug development. They're a profitable business that relies on insurance and relies on patients that is administering ketamine. I could see them administering MDMA if it was legal, and I could see them administering other substances that were legal as well. But I think that's where the money is going to be made right now. The drugs that are coming down the pipe and how that stuff works, I think no one really knows how that's going to play out.
Well, one of the benefits of what they're doing, like Compass and all that, is that you're right. They have a lot of the same properties as like regular psilocybin, but they're different. They'll have a few differing characteristics, and one of them will be consistency, right? So whether you think psilocybin will be in the clinics with the Numinous or whatever in its pure form down the road, the ones that they're patenting right now are actually going to get phase 3 approval if they do, and then they'll be used in the clinic first, right? So they're going to have some sort of runway in which to use that specific compound of psilocybin or MDMA or whatever for the time being until something else catches up. So I think that's what investors in Compass would argue, that yes, Comp 360, for example, is the same as psilocybin or largely the same, but because it went through the FDA phase 3 approval process, it will get approval first and it will be used first, and it will have X number of years of runway before other like substances will be, come down the pike.
Yeah, and I think once people really understand that, like you said, $1 trillion industry. Last thing I forgot to mention, disclaimer at the top, all views of the Trade of Black podcast, the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice, and the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. This has been really good. stepped outside of our normal verticals, but interesting stuff to say the least, because like you said, Ben, this longevity industry, I know you've been writing some really good stories recently about it, but I see this like just exploding at a rapid pace in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, I think so too. I take supplements every day, 8 or 9 different supplements to try to attenuate the aging process myself. So that's why I'm very interested in this sector, because if there's something better, like the next generation of therapeutics that can actually have a much better effect than taking resveratrol and taking turmeric or whatnot, those are coming. And I think that if you have the ability to prolong your life and still have a very strong quality of life, I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people. I mean, just think of the market potential of that. I mean, to me, that would trump cannabis, that trumps psychedelics, that trumps about anything I can think of, right? The ability to extend your life 20, 30, 40 years and do it with a high quality application would be very...
But the main problem there, there's still going to be affordability. I mean, in that story of that gentleman that's going through all the doctors and all the stuff right now to become younger, I mean, he's spending the big headline is always $2
million a month.
This guy's spending $2 million a year on doctors and on upkeep. And I don't know about you guys, but I sure as hell can't afford that.
Was it $2 million a year? Was it $2 million a year or $2 million a month?
$2 million. No, it's $2 million a year.
Okay.
It was $2 million a year on doctors and stuff, etc. But that's...
Oh, it's insane, but this is ground floor stuff,
even at
right?
the consumer,
like this is going to, the whole hope is that, the first adopters is super expensive, not accessible to anybody, but then that cost comes down with scale like any other industry, right? So that's the assumption going forward. Yeah. The assumption is it won't be just for the rich 1% or whatever. It will be, scaled down to something where at least, goes to the middle class, can apply for it and afford it.
But then we can't. This is going to get into a whole nother rabbit hole, and then you can argue, because then you can argue that we're already overpopulated. So do you really want the lower and the middle classes living just as long as everybody else that's doing what else? I mean, no.
Yeah, but what happens to China? China's got to have 700 million people as far as like immigration because
but China are good. Like China are good at keeping everything at the top.
But as far as they have an aging country, you can't just call up whoever and say, I need to have 700 million people move to my country. Like, this makes me believe that you...
but China's also a very poor country. Yeah. China's poor are poor. Like, their middle class has gotten a bump in the last couple of years to the last decade, but they're still poor. I mean, a lot of people forget that, 30 years ago, you probably could classify China as a third world country. Mm-hmm. I mean, China's booming, but their people are still poor.
Yeah, Europe, aging continent, that's for sure. Canada, definitely.
So's the U.S.
U.S. Yeah.
I mean, so's the U.S. Just look at all the boomers right now.
There's going to be ethical issues in this industry no matter what. Just look at Bangalore. Who's to say that why can't people live in squalor from Bangalore? They won't be able to afford it. I think we can all agree that if it comes commercialized, a lot of people won't be able to afford it. And I think that's what you're saying. And this is why it goes back to the start of the conversation at the start of the show, where I think ethics should be more front and center before some of these technologies come into play. It seems like, the way things are going, we develop the technology first because they're cool and they have applications. We invest in it and then think about the ethics later. So I think you can say a lot of things about a lot of different industries, how they do that, right? And I don't know if that's the right way to go. We should probably think about the ethics first and then see if we want to progress down that path.
It's not the world we live in.
No one at the top of I mean, let's be real. No one at the top of the cone gives a fuck about ethics. I mean, I was reading an article. It is what it is. Like they're like rich people don't care about poor people. Rich people, you know why they're so driven by money? Because it's freedom. That's why that's why they only talk to people in their own class. I mean, the whole class thing in the world is very, very real.
Yeah.
And I mean, if there's any sort of anti-aging breakthrough or there's any sort of longevity breakthrough, I mean, as fucked up as it sounds, you don't want everybody to have access to it.
Yeah.
It'd be a net negative.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Than a net positive. If anything, it'd be a bigger stress on all the institutions that we already have built, the environment, everything. it'd be chaos.
Ben, you don't need it either.
It's good that
You're 60 what?
certain
7?
people
67?
expire.
Yeah, I'm 67, so I guess my supplement regimen works, right? Or
All right, gents,
Yeah.
this has been good. We'll catch up with you later this week.
all right, thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Talk soon.
Take care. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. 2023 is here, and right now, a lot of uncertainty pertaining to the markets, especially new emerging industries like crypto, cannabis, psychedelics, and more. So leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview. What are the questions that you want asked? And most importantly, what's the information that you want to learn? Once we produce these videos, then share this to your network, subscribe to our channel, and click on that bell for all notifications because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.